She pulled into the old garage at midnight, mascara smudged, hands trembling on the wheel. When the mechanic walked out from the shadows, she felt her breath catch, not because she was afraid, but because something about his eyes made her want to confess everything. Victoria Chen hadn't cried in 3 years. Not since she became CEO. Not since her father told her emotions were for people who couldn't afford to be weak. She'd built an empire on 12-hour days and a heart wrapped in steel. But tonight, everything was falling apart. Her car had broken down on a highway she didn't recognize, miles from the city lights. The board was planning to vote her out in the morning. Her assistant had quit. And worst of all, she'd started having panic attacks. The kind that made her chest feel like it was caving in, like all the air in the world had disappeared. She'd found this garage by accident. A flickering sign that read Ray's Auto Repair in letters that had probably been bright once, a lifetime ago. She didn't know this broken car would lead her to the man who'd been watching over her for years. The mechanic stepped into the fluorescent light, wiping grease off his hands with a rag that had seen better days. He was maybe 50, with kind eyes that held something she couldn't name. Recognition, maybe, or sorrow. "Rough night?" he asked quietly. Victoria's laugh came out bitter. "You could say that." He didn't push, just nodded and moved toward the hood of her car. "Let me take a look." As he worked in silence, Victoria felt something crack open inside her chest. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the way he didn't ask questions or expect her to be anyone other than a woman whose car had broken down at midnight. "You know what I think?" he said after a while, not looking up from the engine. "I think sometimes cars break down exactly when we need them to. Forces us to stop running." Her throat tightened. "I don't run from anything." He glanced at her then, and something in his expression made her look away. "No," he said softly. "You just forget to breathe until your body makes you." Something about those words felt like he could see straight through her. Through the designer suit, the corporate armor, all the way to the girl who'd lost her mother at 16 and never learned how to grieve. Victoria sat on a worn plastic chair while he worked, scrolling through emails she didn't have the energy to answer. That's when she noticed the photograph tacked to the wall behind the register. A woman. Dark hair, bright smile. Next to her, a teenage boy holding a trophy. "Your family?" she asked, trying to fill the silence. His hand stilled on the wrench. "Was. My wife passed 8 years ago. Cancer. My son." His voice caught. "He died 3 years ago." Victoria's blood went cold. 3 years ago. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but the words felt hollow, inadequate. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He was brilliant. Wanted to be an engineer. Got accepted to MIT, full scholarship. He was driving home to tell me when... He trailed off, shaking his head. Drunk driver ran a red light. Victoria's hands started to shake. She remembered that night. She remembered the call from the hospital. She remembered standing in the cold white hallway, waiting to hear if he'd survived. She wanted to tell him the truth right then. But fear locked the words in her throat. What if he blamed her? What if he looked at her with hate instead of this gentle kindness? "I never got to thank the person who called 911, he continued, tightening a bolt. "The police said a woman in a Mercedes stopped. Stayed with my son until the ambulance came. Held his hand. Talked to him," his voice broke. "The paramedic said he wasn't alone when it happened. That someone told him he was going to be okay. That his father loved him." Victoria couldn't breathe. She was back on that highway 3 years ago, late from a board meeting, watching the horrific scene unfold in her headlights. She'd pulled over without thinking. The boy had been so young, blood on his temple, eyes flickering. She'd held his hand because no one should die alone. She'd whispered promises she couldn't keep. And when the ambulance arrived, she'd slipped away, back to her car, back to her life, back to pretending she was made of stone. She'd never told anyone. Never let herself think about it. "That woman saved something in me," Ray said quietly. "Knowing my son didn't leave this world scared and alone. I spent years trying to find her. To tell her." He swallowed hard. "To tell her she gave me a reason to keep breathing, Victoria." felt the tears come before she could stop. Then 3 years of grief and guilt and carrying a secret that had calcified around her heart. "It was me," she whispered. He froze. "I was the woman in the Mercedes. I held your son's hand. I told him," her voice shattered. "I told him his father would be so proud of him." The wrench slipped from Ray's hand and clattered to the concrete floor. For a moment, neither of them moved. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle cried out. Then Ray walked toward her, slowly, like she might disappear if he moved too fast. His eyes were wet, searching her face. "You," he breathed. "All this time I've been praying to meet you." "I'm so sorry," Victoria sobbed. "I should have done more. I should have—" "You held my boy's hand," Ray interrupted, his voice thick with emotion. "You stayed when you could have driven away. You made sure he knew he was loved." He reached out, hesitated, then gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "You gave both of us a gift that night." Victoria looked up at him through tears. "I've had panic attacks ever since. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. I see him slipping away, and I couldn't—" "You couldn't save him," Ray finished gently. "Neither could I. Neither could the doctors. But you made sure he left this world with kindness. That's not nothing. That's everything." He pulled her into a hug then. This woman he'd just met. This stranger who'd carried his son's final moments like a weight around her neck. And Victoria, who hadn't let anyone hold her since her mother died, collapsed into the embrace. They stood there in that old garage. Two broken people who'd been carrying the same grief from opposite sides. "I think," Ray said quietly, "my son brought you here tonight." Victoria pulled back, wiping her eyes. "You believe in that?" "I believe everything happens for a reason. I believe you needed to know it wasn't your fault, and I needed to finally say thank you." He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Thank you for loving my son when he needed it most." It wasn't just her car he fixed that night. It was the part of her soul that had been running on empty for 3 years, terrified to stop, terrified to feel. Victoria drove away as the sun started to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Her car hummed smoothly beneath her. But more than that, something inside her had shifted. Ray had refused payment. Instead, he'd given her a photograph, one of his son, smiling, holding that trophy. "Keep him with you," he'd said. "And remember, you're allowed to be human. Even CEOs need to breathe." She'd called her assistant before leaving the parking lot, apologized, listened, really listened. She'd postponed the board meeting, scheduled her first therapy appointment. And when the panic started to creep in around her ribs, she looked at the photo on her dashboard and remembered Ray's words. "You gave both of us a gift that night. Sometimes the people we meet by accident aren't accidents at all. They're angels in grease-stained work clothes, sent to remind us that broken things can be fixed, including hearts that forgot how to beat without carrying the weight of the world." Have you ever met someone who appeared exactly when you needed them most, like the universe knew what you needed before you did? Sometimes strangers become the answer to prayers we didn't know we were saying.